My name is Abina Johnson, and this is Focus on Liberia. Hit it! From Cape Mount to Cape Palmer, mountain back to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Pokonjre, to educate, elevate, and promote. Talk about home affairs, hey, in diaspora, current affairs, hey, reliable information, history, talking about culture, hey, politics, education, entertainment, business, sports, advertisement, articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another edition of Moving Liberia Forward on Focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Jar, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In this edition of Moving Liberia Forward, we're going to be looking at peaceful coexistence. Ever since we have a new president, we've been suggesting ways to move the country forward. And one of the ways is peaceful coexistence, because if we are not at peace, we cannot even work, we cannot do agriculture, we cannot do energy, we can't do anything. With me to discuss today, I have my co-host, Mr. James Larsah. Mr. Larsah, welcome to the series.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. Let's do that together.
Thank you. Our guest is Professor Nancy Eleanor Reeves-Davis. Welcome, Professor Reeves.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Thank you very much, James.
And I'm used to Nancy and then Nancy Reeves, but now she's Nancy Reeves-Davis. So sometimes I will, when I say Nancy Reeves, please understand that the name has changed.
Okay.
Yeah, so I will, and Professor Reeves is a proud, she refers to herself as a Liberian Canadian. She's joining us from Canada, where she is a professor of equity, diversity, and inclusion. That's what she does at this college. That's the Conestoga University in Canada, or Conestoga College in Ontario, Canada. She's a practicing clinical mental health therapist also in Canada. She considers herself a global citizen with deep passion for education and social justice issue. It's been a while, Professor Reeves, since you've been here. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Thank you very much.
And how are you doing in Canada? How's everything? How's the community?
Very well. Canada doing very well. It's getting cold. I mean, those in Minnesota can attest to that, because it seems like we drift everything from Canada into Minnesota. But other than that, it's very good. Everyone very busy, running up and down for the Christmas. And thank God for life.
We've done a couple of these series, James, and you witnessed. The first one was on energy, how we move Liberia forward. We had Mr. Al Davis presenting energy. We have the curriculum specialist and teacher, Eleanor Saba, talking about education, a way to move the country forward. We have our own Carl Farmulan, who discussed transport, or the transport industry as a way of moving the country forward. Yesterday, we discussed higher education. It's a way of moving the country forward. James, before we even begin the show, what has been your own impression so far discussing these topics relative to our country and where we are as a nation?
Yeah, Dennis, it's been interesting to see that the discussion have trended towards really reaching untapped areas in terms of the relevant subjects of the day, such as you said, energy, education, and the likes. So my impression is that we are trending in the right direction because this is something that is virtually not covered in almost every other place or platform. So this is great. Let us give ourselves exposure and draw spotlight on personalities like Mrs. Davis, Reeves-Davis, in terms of who they are and their own ideas, so that they can get to be heard, and to get to understand their own thoughts about how the country should be trending and what are some of the problems and possible solutions. So, Dennis, I can't say enough in describing how I think significantly this program can contribute to the development, the forward move of the country forward.
Thank you. If you have not done so already, please share the show, invite someone. We're going to get deep into it. Professor Reeves believes that peaceful coexistence and the implication for sustainable development. So let me start by asking you, Professor Reeves, we are talking about moving the country forward, and you say peaceful coexistence is vital. Let's start by telling me and our audience what is peaceful coexistence.
Well, thank you so much, Dennis. Thank you, James. As you've already said, we can talk about building rules and infrastructure development and education, and you name all of those. They are very important. But when we talk about sustaining those things that we put in place, or even getting to developing those things that we put in place, we need to be able to coexist in a peaceful way. If anyone has a doubt as to whether peaceful coexistence it can materialize or lead to sustainable development, then you just go back to the Civil War. Just go back to the Civil War and see how things were all totally disruptive, and it leads to nothing, right? So we've had, as Liberia, we've had a real tough time historically that I really want us to look back to and see how it impacted us as individuals, as groups, as a nation, and even within our sub-regions, right? So peaceful coexistence, the concept came most a lot from the Soviet, the Cold War era, where you have socialist and capitalist states, and the best way they could go about in this big word we call it is peaceful coexistence. So whether based on the political ideology or the weapons or whatsoever it was that they used during that era, they needed to exist peacefully. Whether socialists or capitalists, that concept was widely used in there. And today, that's why we have some peace between socialists and capitalist countries. So we looked at simply living together in peace than in conflict or hostilities. I mean, we're not saying it will be absent and it will never exist. It may exist, but to what extent can we, as humans, as citizens of a country, live together peacefully, where we can even compete for what the capitalists would say scarce resources, right? But we are not at war. We are not at strife with one another, right? We can have political ideologies and political differences, but we can learn to live and work and build and rebuild in a more peaceful way. And in so doing, we have mutual respect for one another. Very important, right? It's not coming in the form of a real aggressive way of addressing issues, right? And as nations, even with that, or even individuals, there's non-interference, right? If even that happened, we do it in a more respectful way. We believe in equality. Equality, we believe in human rights. We believe in dignity of the rights of people. We believe in diversity. And even in Liberia, we got different tribes and ethnicity and all of that. We respect one another for the differences we bring, whether we eat palava sauce or palm butter or whatsoever. We respect the level of diversity, and we develop and maintain, not just developing, but we maintain that mutual respect for one another, despite our political differences. That's the sort of principles that coexistence is built upon.
Right. And so how is this important for nation building, for moving the country forward, for sustainable development? How is it important? And in areas where, and give me some examples, countries where because of no peaceful coexistence, the people. But first, let me start with how is this important, moving the country forward?
How is it important, and why it's important? Because it helps us realize human rights. Human rights and dignity. When we learn to coexist in a peaceful way, we respect individuals' human rights, the right to live, the right to speak, the right to choose who we want to vote for, right? It is very important. And that's why it says that peaceful coexistence is a product of human rights. And that is very important, that we can live together despite our differences, but we respect the rights and well-being of each and every person. It values that. And that we need to make sure that it exists amongst us. And it's also immeasurable. It's immeasurable how we can attain these basic rights of human existence when we learn to live and coexist in a very peaceful way. Important, so Dennis, it brings about stability. The stability we want to see in our nation in order to develop and sustain those development. It brings about harmony amongst us, which is very important. It allows us as individuals to grow and develop a nation, especially Liberia, that we want to see for ourselves, for our generation, right? But most importantly, it fosters those economic growth, social cohesion, protection of citizens in a country. And as I will keep going back to and saying, which is one of the issues that really caused disruptions in Liberia, looked at the civil war that happened in Liberia. And it tells you that the principles of social justice, human rights, dignity is important and paramount to our existence as humans and as Liberians.
Jimmy, before you come in, so let's put it in context now for Liberia.
Correct.
Before the Civil War, did we have peaceful coexistence, or is it the Civil War that caused it? So, make for my auntie in who is living in Sibe, what is peaceful coexistence to her? Is it tournament time? We're having days and things were peaceful, and now things not peaceful. So, how do you really give some examples of peaceful coexistence in Liberia, both before the war and after the war?
Are you speaking to me or James?
No, I'm speaking to you. I'm saying.
Oh, sorry. I thought you. But,
No,
but
I'm saying. Okay, give me concrete examples of because is it when we say peaceful? Did we have peaceful coexistence before the war, or does it happen after the war? Or so talk to my auntie in Sino County. What is this peaceful coexistence, and what are some of the things that you can tell us that hey, at this point in time in Liberia there was peaceful coexistence. At this time there was no, and because of that peaceful coexistence, we're doing well. And after it was disrupted, so break it down for her.
You know what, Dennis and James, Liberia has, for the long time that I've lived, the country Liberia has, like many parts of the world, been up and down in its own different phases and whatsoever. But Liberia have come from some real tremendous era, right? We go back historically to the transatlantic slave trade in Liberia. And sometimes I hear people say that the free slaves or the free men of color came and founded Liberia. Well, native Liberians were in Liberia and existed and coexisting in some way, shape, or form until the slave trade came. And all of us who knows about the slave trade, we know how it disrupted the social, economic, or whatsoever fabric that existed in Liberia around that time, where slaves were all taken forcefully into slave trade or slavery. That caused a real disruption, not only in Liberia, in Africa. Very important. And we know after that, the slaves returned. By 1822 or so, the slaves were returning to Africa after the slave trade was over in America. But if we follow the history again of the slave trade, Liberia went through almost a century of oppression, indigenous Liberians, when the slaves returned. That was disrupted because you're talking about almost 100 years of oppression. We have one party system, the True Whig Party, right? And then, like, you can never say in a country where you have the indigenous people and the slaves who return being treated in an oppressive way, that's a peaceful coexistence, right? And we know that led to the 1979 rice riots. I was pretty small by then, but I still remember my dad, who worked at Mobile, running home to say to my mother, make sure to keep your children indoors. We know the disruption that went on with Marcus Matthew and those other political parties that went against Tolbert and had the rice riots in Monrovia. There was a lot of disruption. I lived across the breach by then. And by the time this situation was over, so many stores were bust into, people were killed, and so forth. That did not lead to a peaceful coexistence amongst Liberians. That was the time we had a real political heat rising up in Liberia, because we all know by then the native Liberians were rising up against American Liberians. As if that was not enough, we had a 1980 coup that brought Samuel Doe to power, where Tolbert and those men were killed, and Doe took over. So we had a military government in Liberia, and the expectation that it will all be okay with I always laugh at this song when they say native woman born soldier and Congo woman born rogue, right? And the native soldiers came in, and we had a military government, and we had some of the worst human rights abuse that happened in Liberia. I still remember the day that they said there was this famous journalist, I've just forgotten his name, who was even beheaded. We didn't even have the freedom to talk about human rights and social justice and so forth. That didn't really exist much with Doe's government, because the press live in fear.
Are you talking about Charles Boyan?
Charles Boyan, exactly.
Oh, Charles Boyan, okay.
Charles Boyan, right? And was beheaded, right? What kind of peaceful coexistence were we in when these things were happening in Liberia? Right. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but look, yes, I heard you talking about peaceful coexistence. I mean, the whole theory of peaceful coexistence having to have its own origin with nations. Yeah, with nations and block of nations. Now, we talking about a single country like Liberia, or a society where there are people of different backgrounds living in things. And of course, you talk about slavery. And there's this whole issue of the love of Liberty Brothers here. Many people believe that this is a manifestation of the arrival of the free slaves from America to Liberia. But reading deeply, you get to know that the love of Liberty Brothers here certainly can fit within the context of Liberians who were in Liberia long before the slaves came. Like, for example, I'm sorry to say that, but I come from a petty background and I have some basic understanding of how, and based on reading, of how, Liberians mainly were in the Mali Empire, and that is where they were. A good portion of Liberia now, or some people from the Africa Coast, the Pele, the Kisi, the Loma, and the Mandingos were all in Mali, and Mandingos being the ruling class at the time took on to Islam and started forcing the other people to join Islam. And the others, including the Pele people, were like, you know what happened? We believe in our tradition. We have our traditional beliefs, and we believe in them, and so we are not just going to change our religion overnight like that. And they didn't buy into it. As a result, they were persecuted and they started running away. That's how today they ran away from Mali and came all the way, running away from the Mandingo people. When Yep were talking about the whole Liberian versus Mandingo, they don't understand the history behind that. And people don't just forget. So we came down, running down for freedom. The love of liberty brought them from Mali all the way, and still the ruling class, which were the brothers and sisters of the Perakisi, they were all one people. So, they would go on the farm, and when the people ran away, went on their farm, and then, they would come and beat drums and make it. Those days, just to beat drums meant a lot. It was like throwing a bomb among people. When they heard the drum song and the colors, they would run away, and the children and the women would be captured, and the men would run away and things like that. So that whole love of Liberty Brothers here certainly can fit within that context long before the arrival of the slaves. So I just wanted to draw that point in. Now, since this whole thing started with nations among nations and Black of nations, and now we're talking about society, can you just speak to, I know you just elaborated some areas in Liberia where we have conflicts. Can you describe the current state of peaceful coexistence in Liberia? Because especially for now, where we've had elections and there's the talk of the country is divided, Some believe it, some accept it, some don't. Some think it's just for political theater and for self-serving interests. Because the more you say the country is divided, it makes it look like somebody owns the other side and another man owns the other side. There are those who also don't think that this country is really divided. What's your own understanding of the state of peaceful coexistence of Liberians now?
Thank you so much, James. As I listen to what you said, the historical nature of the Pele and the other groups there, as I said initially, we've all along had some level of existence, whether peacefully as 100% as we wanted to, which can never be, right? But in order to go on with development, and we'll talk about sustainable development, we need that. Where Liberia is now, and that's the next stage I will move up to after the coup, and then we had the Civil War, right, which we know what it led to in the history of Liberia, with over approximately 250,000 individuals there. Some of the massive atrocities you can think about that happened in the history of Liberia caused a lot of disruptions in the West African sub-region. And we had an elections, and we had, President Weah in power after Ellen Johnson. And we can never deny the fact that this current elections in Liberia had a lot of us sitting on thorns as to what would have happened. That country was absolutely divided. I mean, look at the picture that came out the last time where a lady was totally beaten up. I heard she died after she was asked, who she voted for. Right? People are still bleeding. I hear a lot from Liberia that people don't want to even speak to one another because of political differences, ideological thoughts. They wanted Weah to win. They wanted Bouaka to win. When you have an election where the 51% led to the win, and about 40-some% to the other party, the country is divided. And I would speak on some other ways we can bring together that, move away from that divisiveness into more togetherness in order to foster sustainable development. So if I may answer what you said, that yes, there is division in Liberia. We need to come together to build one Liberia. And that what brought me to talking about this topic today, because the more we are together, there's a song, the better we will be, the better we will develop Liberia, the better we will create a more sustainable group of people, economy, etc., etc. So we need that. And we can't deny that it is not happening. There isn't division. There is division going on. People are hurt that their party did not win.
So what is responsible for the absence, if I would put it that way, of peaceful coexistence?
Well, again, people's political thought. People keep a lot of grudges against one another for, certain things that happen to them amongst themselves. But in this political situation, we're talking about, my party did not win. I wanted George Weah to win, and I wanted Bouaka to win, and it didn't happen. Because if we believe in democracy and the freedom of individuals to express the democratic right, we will accept the outcome of an election. It's very important, right? If we went to the ballot box and another political party won that elections, we need to be respectful of it. If we are not respectful of it, then we have these issues of political divisiveness. And if you look at the word respect, it's very important. And it's broken down as an acronym into some very important concept, right? When we respect one another, we respect individuals' opinions. It is very important. I'm sure you've heard the words, we agree to disagree. We show that. When we respect one another, we encourage one another, and we encourage ourselves to gain new ideas. Our thoughts and our perceptions on issues are made very clean and clear. We share those experiences. We're able to sit and say, I had a question and say, it is important that Liberians and even President Weah and the CDC come to an understanding as to why the CDC did not win these elections. If we respect one another and respect the opinions of others, we'll sit and say, what mistakes did we make? I listened to President Weah at a church service. I guess he was the pastor preaching. And he carried on an analogy where he asked about 50 persons to walk through the door. And that did not happen easily. And he asked them to walk in one by one. And it happened easily. What he was saying there, when too many people are rushing for something, it does not happen. So when do we sit and encourage one another and listen to one another that we can converse and understand in a better way? That entails respect for differences of ideas, differences of opinion. When we do that, we share. We become a sharing nation. In so doing, participation is very positive. We do so in a very positive way, right? And most importantly is we're able to express those opinions in the way that we can learn from one another. We can learn our mistakes, right? And in so doing, we even respect the era in which we made the changes. This President Weah era would be one great era in the history of Liberia. But we can only understand it if we learn to respect the differences of ideas and opinions that went on. It is very, very important. And it takes time to doing that, but we need to put in the efforts of doing that.
Thank you.
So those are the areas that I wanted to speak to in the history of Liberia that contributed to some of our peaceful or non-peaceful coexistence. And that came from the slave trade. And James, thank you for what you just added into that. But we need to, as a country, look at where we've come from and where we are. It is very important. Through that, we will see the mistakes that we've made along the way and the good things that we've done. Otherwise, we keep making the same mistakes over and over and again.
So, what is the correlation between peaceful coexistence and sustainable development? And I want you to look at other countries because we talk about elections, right? That people are divided because of the outcome. And I think that happens everywhere. Even here, when Obama won, some people said they were even moving out of the country, going to Canada. When Trump won, the same thing. When Joe Biden. So there's always that tension. Yet, development is going on. Things are okay. People getting paid. So do we have examples of countries where because of these upheavals or because there is no peaceful coexistence, things are stagnant, and where there is peaceful coexistence, things are moving up?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're right. In the United States of America, the developing world, they understand what political ideologies are, right? If you're a Democrat or Republican, what is most important is the country. When we put country first, we can all have our different skirmishes going on. The country moves on. When we don't put the country first and put our selfishness there, then we have a real problem. And looked at what went on in Liberia during the last, or what we know with corruption that goes on. But let's focus on Liberia with the last president we as government. And this is what we're talking about. The massive poverty that went on in this country, or that is still going on. I was speaking to someone this morning, and they told me, I don't know how true it is, but civil servants have not been paid in this country. Someone told me that Christmas is so cold in Liberia. Where is the social and economic development, Dennis? Where is it? Because financial policies and social policies are so poor. When you have a country where there's so much filth, you know, we can talk about all of those, but those are just some typical example where if even people not marching through the streets and fighting and doing other things, you can tell that the government is not aligning with the will, a desire of the people.
So like in Ghana, I think Ghana is doing well, is doing relatively well. Is it because of peaceful coexistence?
Absolutely. You're not seeing Ghana. I was there for some time, and I know there is, you know, when we were there in the 90s to when I went back a few years ago, the economic situation is tough. It's hard for some people. But if you looked at the situation in Ghana amongst Ghanaians, I'm not talking about the refugees on the refugee camp, but you looked at the situation in Ghana economically, they are doing well. The fact that Liberians have to be leaving Liberia and going to Ghana for medical treatment when they have money speaks volume. So and peaceful coexistence then it's not only with the people, the citizens, the government has a role to play in that. Right? The policies of the government can help or develop a more sustainable economic society where there is peaceful coexistence. So what does the government know is happening to its people? It's very, very, very important. Yes, relatively, I will tell you there's better peaceful coexistence in Ghana than what I'm hearing from Liberia. Though I haven't been there for a little while, but yes, from what I'm hearing, and as I said, the mere fact that you have to leave Ghana and go down to Liberia for better medical treatment, something is not right. Something is absolutely not right in there. And we talked about human rights and the dignity of rights of people.
Sorry. Yeah, so I was going to ask you about that. Dennis just asked a question, and then he predicated that with a question about development. What can contribute towards the development of the country? So, I was going to bring in, for example, the case of India. India is almost like Liberia. At one point, Liberia was far more progressive than India. Today, India is way up there, and they gave key things they gave credit to for that development are that the British built the rail system, the train system, and left it with them. They credit that very much for their development, their progress. And then the English language. The English is the only thing that crosses across India. They don't speak the same language, they don't have the same religion. And the third one is the Western education. In Liberia, we can boast of religion. More than 85% of Liberians are Christians. That should be a key driver towards peaceful coexistence and working towards progress and development. And then we also have this Western education, although the literacy rate is high, but we do have that as a matter of reality. Which is why when my son came here, he didn't have to go take the test for second language. So, in what way specifically can you draw a connection between such key elements I just mentioned in India, at least in the case of Liberia, that will be connected to development that can help towards the development. I know, like I said, we have Christianity, we have Western education, so maybe you can, kind of reflect on that a little bit.
Well, I mean, when we're talking about peaceful coexistence, it doesn't mean there is zero peaceful coexistence, right? You know, in the qualitative researcher will tell you they looked at the trend and where things are going. You looked at the sample size and what outcome you can come up with to say what is happening. For now in Liberia, the last 6 years or so, I mean, after the war and Ellen took over and whatnot, things were part on. But for the last 6 years or so, we know there are things that have been happening that may drain this country for the worse, right? And these are things that needs to be looked into and see how best Liberia can be helped. It is a hope that when you say it, others on the other political side have things to say, and I always say this: now I don't hate any government. I think governments are there to do what they should do for its people. But when you have students going for national examinations and so many failing, when you have students in tertiary institutions writing and they look so poor, when you have students completing the universities and colleges, and you wonder what is the outcome-based education, what curriculum are developed, and what is the outcome? Are you saying complete the university or college and go into the market to sell? How can you turn those tertiary education into something more creative and more innovative? I completed my master's of social work and I own a private practice. Not everyone will graduate and end up in the office. There are a lot of doctors you and I know who have the private practice. Are we building up the education system in Liberia to benefit students in this way? Some students, not all. But those who cannot find their way into the offices, we're talking about sustainable development here. And does the government have a part to play in this? Absolutely, yes. The government is a part of sustainable group and development. How would they do that? What consultation is the Ministry of Education or Health or all of these different sectors having through whether town hall meetings, through the Ministry of Information, the Ministry of Education, you name it. So when you peacefully coexist, it's not just about people not running off the street and fighting. It's about getting to understand the needs of your people and how you can turn those needs into sustainable development. So 1 or 2 students can come from Liberia into the United States, Gene, and do very well. But I'm looking at the majority, what's becoming of the lives of the majority of Liberians. Not everyone will cross over into the Atlantic, but those who remain in Liberia, how can they turn the education into something more productive for themselves and their livelihood?
Yeah.
That's part of peaceful coexistence.
Let me
Because
follow. James started a very, raised a very important point about Christianity. So the Christians, predominantly in Liberia, we have Christianity, we have Islam, and both religions are peaceful. They call for peace. In fact, the Christians will say, if somebody slap you on the right cheek, turn the left cheek, right?
yeah,
So in the midst of this religiousness, why are we not? Why is there a low when it comes to peaceful coexistence? Why is that low? Because I mean, this should be a very big driver. How people are so spiritual. So what's happening?
well, the Bible says not everyone who says Lord, Lord will enter the kingdom of heaven. Right, Dennis? By saying that Liberia is a Christian nation, we had a civil war that killed over 250,000 people. We still have this sort of instant justice on the streets. We have one of the worst kind of corruption that happened over the last 6 years. You're talking about justice for the Liberian people. But even during the biblical time, Jesus was rejected. So I say this to people: the Bible gives us the will to do that which is right or wrong, and mankind chooses to do the wrong. Does it mean we should stop? Then we wouldn't be sitting here today and talking about peaceful coexistence and the need for Christian values. We just don't stop. We continue to talk about it because that's why God will have judgment day. And on the day of judgment, we will be judged for what we do and how we listen to the word of God and the role we play in our lives or in the lives of others.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, but look, the late President Dr. Amos Sawyer, in one of his TRC testimonies, he spoke on. He gave enormous credit to Christian missionary, Christian education. He said, "Thank God to the Christian missionaries who came here to educate us." And he said it in a way that sounded like he could almost give the Christian missionary the credit for the entirety of the benefit of Christian education in Liberia. He said, had it not been for them. And that fact cannot be disputed. Because even if you look, for example, just in the last presidential election, even the one before, President Johnson benefited from Christian education. Mr. Cummings, Christian education. Buaka, Christian education. All of them went to Methodist school or Baptist school or Lutheran school, things like that play a major role, and this can be a unifying force for the country. And when we are, like you are seeing, you talk about diversity and different views, holding different views, and sharing those views and being able to express them. I think Dr. Sawyer was expressing his view about what he thought really play a key role in the development of the country. So talking about peaceful coexistence, society needs to be peaceful. The people need to live in peace in order to achieve development.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, what recommendation will you advance? Say if you were given the challenge of making any recommendation to the incoming government, for example, what recommendation will you give to them regarding peaceful coexistence for development?
Well, you know what? The key words I would say: listen to the people. Listen to the people. It's one thing to sit up and say, this is my office. I sit in here and do the work I'm given to do. Listen to the people. Get out there. have town hall meetings. Let the Minister of Information be more active, not only the minister, every minister. I think the Liberian government should have an evaluation department. The United Nations has its monitoring and evaluation. Every project that is sent out there should be evaluated in terms of its impact on people. The Ministry of Education should have outcome. I'm sure you had a person on your show here that talked about outcome-based education. Dennis and James, you and I know how much education is playing a big role in North American society. It's education that keeps this place going. Innovative, creative education. It's important. Of course, I've said it over and over, get people working. When we grew up in Liberia, I saw my dad wake up in the morning and get dressed and go to work, give people jobs. A hungry man is an angry man. Our fathers got up and went to work. They didn't get up and just sit behind the house. Get people working to build up this country, get money flowing. During the COVID and all of these epidemic spread out, there was what you call the stimulus package. The economic justification for stimulus packages is to get money circulating. When you make your economy stagnant, you kill the spirit of the people, right? And I'm sure you got some of these good economists coming up. I see like the former Minister of Finance, Amara Conan, and the rest all there with Boaka. But education, healthcare, community development, social services, including education and healthcare, very important. Very, very important. Having Liberians running off to Ghana for medical treatment makes no sense to me. I was much small when I saw in Liberia Ghanaians coming over to Liberia on boats and ships and buses for economic freedom. And today, we are partying up there to kill individuals who have the money. We can do better than that. And that's all part of peaceful coexistence because, if people are hungry and angry and sad in their own country and feel so alienated, you do not have peaceful coexistence. Anger runs up in the air. And I teach a course on anger management. Those are triggers for individuals, right? Because they wake up in the morning, they have nothing to look up to. Nothing to look up to. You have your countrymen who just become beggars. That's not peaceful coexistence. People are literally, innately unhappy with their lives. Right. So those are just few things the government can look into doing. But, Liberians, we have a role to play in this as citizens of this country in terms of our understanding and the will to contribute. When we come into North America and Europe as Africans, we get ourselves involved. We wake up in the morning, 3:30, 4:30. This 24/7 economy, we are a part of it. We go to work from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. You don't leave before your time is over. You clock in, you clock out. By 2 p.m. in most of the ministries in Liberia, everyone is gone. How do you get work done when you leaving the work undone? What makes a difference when you come into North America that you can't do in your own country? Right? You can never, I've been a professor here for 15 or so years. You never take money from a student to pass them because you would be reported and you could lose your job. But it happens in our society. Why is it happening? Teachers will tell you they can't get paid. So the government needs to, provide teachers with what they need to provide sustainable outcome-based education to students.
Right.
It creates peaceful coexistence.
So I'm listening to you and what you've said about peaceful coexistence. You first started with human right, and now you're talking about. So basically, I'm looking at the rule of law and the economy, right? So where there is the absence of the rule of law and the economy is bad, things will be. So how is that different? Or let me put it this way: why is it not, a vibrant economy and the rule of law? Because people in Liberia have been, coexisting peacefully for a long time. We don't see ethnic fight. We don't see people, religious fight. So the issue is the economy and rule of law. Am I getting it wrong?
We've had ethnic differences. The Liberian Civil War was ethnic warfare.
That was like
Dennis.
30 years ago.
No, that was not right. Right. When you say that, Dennis, it makes what became. I don't want to hash things here, but if you did a research now in Liberia, you would get a lot of huge findings about the unhappiness of many people when it comes to their experience with the atrocities of that civil war.
I just think it's the economy. The economy is bad.
No, the economy has a lot to do with that, but you can use money to smash up people's emotions. You had a civil war where a lot of people died, people were treated badly, and you have not had a single sit down to heal those wounds. Don't think people have just forgotten it. Don't think so. Right. It has a role to play in it. And we can
doing better, right?
And Dennis, I do counseling here. As a mental health specialist also. I've gone into Liberia and I've stood up and observed people's behavior. People are traumatized in that country. Right. And one thing I would ask the Bwaka government to do is to put in place a strong mental health structure to deal with not only the aftermath of the war, but also deal with normal day-to-day living conditions that can have an impact on individuals' mental health and their mental well-being. When you do that, you instill in people the right to live, the will to live. So the economy, yes, is great. If the economy can trickle down money into mental health issues, great. Then it creates a better social fabric, right? Because then people know that when someone does something to you or says something wrong, you don't just grab them and beat them up to death. That's an angry society. Everything triggers people because of the beneath and underneath situations that have not been addressed. And it's turned from slavery. You ask American Liberians whose descendants were killed during the 1980 coup. You ask indigenous Liberians who were enslaved and oppressed by American Liberians.
I think that's a strong word to say. Indigenous were enslaved and oppressed by American Liberians.
Oh yes, and I would say it, and repeatedly I would say it.
We don't have that history.
We have it. Except we want to block in that history. Those are the dark history of Liberia that we need to talk about.
Okay.
They were enslaved. What happened was enslavement.
I mean,
I'll tell you this.
Where do we have enslavement?
I'll tell you what my father's experience was. My father lived with an older lady and was going to school. And the older lady's son would tell my father every morning he had to bring him a cup of hot tea to walk in Larsah from up the hill straight down to the school. And when he got there and was late for school, he took the tea from him and said, "Go home, you are late." So he wouldn't go to class. Meanwhile, he had to walk with a hot cup of tea. How do you term that? That's enslavement. Right. But anyways, historically, there were, parts and part of that built this history of Liberia we're talking about. We can never forget the dark side of Liberia. And it trickles down to where we find ourselves today in Liberia. So that's why I said, until we address some of these situations, it becomes a education for us all as we move along. We talk about race and race relations in North America. We talk about race and race relations, racism, and we've added other concepts, sexism, ageism, ableism, and all of that. We can hold the white man accountable for these things that they do to us, but sometimes we don't hold ourselves accountable. And we think we can just easily move on and keep these things beneath. And one day it bursts out. How could we have killed Tova and the rest for corruption? During the rice riots in Liberia, they said Tova had rice farms. That's why the price of the rice went up. So his intention was to sell his rice in Liberia, right? But during Opon's time, we still had a problem with rice and massive corruption and a very filthy city. And we're sending people over to Ghana for medical treatment. Those who cannot go die in Liberia. Tell me, have we not even enslaved ourselves?
So let's talk about the fix. How do we fix this?
Exactly. We can only fix it, Dennis, if we admit it. And if we can't admit the wrong, I love Dr. Phil when he says, you have to admit to your wrong in order to make amends to the differences. And if we cannot admit that Liberia as a nation has a dark side that we need to work together to fix, we would not be able to exist peacefully.
James, you are muted. You can mute yourself.
Good. Yeah, you're right. You just we have to admit, we have to discuss this, which has to do with sharing, right? That's part of the three. To me, you lay out three key points. One is differences of views, sharing of views, and expression of the views, right?
Yep.
So we have to admit that certain things happen. Like Nessa, I'm also aware that not everything is documented yet. There is a lot about Liberia that has not been documented. There used to be this radio called Star Radio in Liberia. Yeah. It came to an end right after Ellen took over, but that used to be an important radio station. I used to listen to it online from Liberia. And they went to interview this lady in Nimba, and she was speaking Pele, but in the Pele you could hear manner in it. And she had memory of her father being enslaved in Nimba. The Pele people are so easy, they were in slavery in Nimba under Mano Gio people, and she was on Star Radio. Not everything is fully documented yet. It's interesting. But Nancy, I have to take note of the connection you make between good governance, peaceful coexistence, then good governance, and then development. There has to be some reasonable level of social economic equity, the fairness in the distribution of wealth, tax resources, and other things among the people in a way that will go around, so that they want the area of anger and other things and frustration and disenchantment can come into control. Other than that, like Dennis was saying, the rule of law may not be enough to curb that. It may lead to violence and other things. So can you just elaborate more on that? I think you have more to say.
But James, who's responsible for that? Who's responsible for the wealth of a country? The major wealth of a country? Who's in charge of most of the resources of a country? The government has a big role to play in this. We can talk about the private sectors. We can talk about individuals, sole proprietorship and all of that. Yes, it's important. But when I've heard from a lot of people, they want to come in and do businesses, and just going through the Ministry of Commerce, it's a problem. right? Because you end up paying more of the money that you are even coming to invest in, right? We tried that groups here, organizations here who try to get things into Liberia and they get stuck in the port. You spend so much money on doing these. So of course the government has a major role to play in this when we talk about this sustainable development. Of course, we as citizens have part to play in there, but the government has its hands on the huge resources too, and how to distribute those resources. When you're messing around, sorry to say, with the money of a country in corruption, it's horrible. So the government has a major role to play in these. The churches have a major role to play in these. Families have a major role to play in these. Various communities have a major role to play in these. Non-for-profit organizations have a major role to play.
Civil society.
Civil society. I don't know where civics is going in Liberian society now. We did it when we were in school, right? We all have a role to play in a better Liberia. That's why we need peaceful coexistence. And every segment has to do what they have to do or what they need to do.
So starting today, now we have a new president, and you believe that a peaceful coexistence is going to foster sustainable development. If you were in the room with the president now, what would you tell him?
Cherish peaceful coexistence. Listen to your people. Get out of your office. Get out there. Have town hall meetings. Have meetings with your ministers. Get to know what they are doing, which projects they are undertaking. Put in place a program and evaluation structure to make sure that money invested into projects have outcomes. It is very, very, very important. Build up the different infrastructure. We talk about education. Make sure Liberians have 21st century education. It is not impossible. You have a lot of Liberians.
How do these things bring about peaceful coexistence? Because
when people are happy, Dennis, they express their happiness.
Right.
They get motivated to being a part of. For now, Liberians are alienated from the wealth of that country over the last 6 years. I hear a lot of Liberians say, I have to work for this Lebanese man. When you have these, don't get me wrong, I'm not preaching like a nationalist here, but let Liberians, and the socialists will tell you, when you alienate citizens from the wealth of their country, or even being partakers of their country, it does not create a peaceful coexistence. They don't feel happy. It creates a lot of anger, because one of the modules that I teach when I teach anger management has to do with the ABCD module. The trigger. What is the trigger for many Liberians? Poverty is traumatic, Dennis. It's very traumatic. Very traumatizing. When you can't even afford food today and don't even know if you will have some tomorrow, it's traumatic. And what perception does it leave on the minds of most people? They don't belong. We talk about racism in North America and belonging. But when you're in your own country and you don't feel like you belong, you have to beg a foreigner for a job to live and feed your family. That is hard. Right? So President Walker needs to make sure that Liberians, or most Liberians, can wake up in the morning and have something to hope for. Whether to go to work, to go to school, to send their children to school, something they can hope for. When you create hope in people, you create within them the will to live and sustainable development in your country.
And
so
those
if I had to sit with him out, those are some of the things I would tell him.
Correct, and that cannot be overemphasized at all. Listening to the people, and like you said, good governance. And like Ellen used to say, when Ellen came, she said, "Oh, how they call it that when if you create a condition in which when at the end of the day when the father is coming home, the children will be happy. Papa not come home, Papa not come home. That was like a mantra. And then when we came, he talked about Liberians will not be spectators. Whether that came to fruition is just another whole question, but it underscores your point that Liberians have to be participants in their own economy. They have to be active participants in order to engender peaceful coexistence for development. You don't run a government and say citizens will not be spectators when you're taking the contract and giving it to people outside the country, to Lebanese men, Indian men, Ghanaian men, and the Liberians there have nothing to do, like going to clean the airport or sell food at the airport and things like that. You couldn't say it enough, and we hope that the incoming government will listen. There's a thing currently trending on Facebook. I don't know whether it is true. I often don't like to make comment on such, but I'm constrained to do that here. That VP Boaka there's a renovation going on at his home. That is, the renovation will be costing about $150,000, but it's being done by Lebanese people. I don't think that's true, but I have no basis. I just have to bring that in to share an idea about what you're saying. Liberians will have to prioritize making sure that the citizens are active participants in their own economy. And this is important. And that's a point you are stressing, Nancy. I just thought to underscore that. But now you've emphasized on the government listening, actively listening, and
James,
admitting.
Before you go there, let me announce our call number because we have callers already.
Oh, okay.
So you will join the conversation. The number is 605-313-6004. The code is 791-403#. Let me bring in the first caller, and then you can continue from there, James.
Great.
Go ahead, caller. Your name and where you calling from?
Hello, Mr. John. This is Elvis calling from Minnesota. Thank you for the program. Thanks to Mrs. Nancy and Mr. Larsah. I think one of the things you touched on, and some of us who are in the political space, people think when we say these things is for political reasons, but I think there's this underlying tension that is still within the country. That's why we say reconciliation is needed. Not for any political reasons, but for example, right? You have our vice president-elect who was saying some things about what happened on the Samuel bill with the people of Nimba, or the children of Nimba. In response to that, you have a sitting or elected senator from Grand Jita who is raising, alarm that there will be the killings of Grand Jita or the targeting of Grand Jitians when this, next government comes into power. So when we were talking about reconciliation, which I think President Weah did a pretty good job with, but I think if, my questions would be, what do you think President-elect Boyka can do to even, further the reconciliation in our country? Is that, through implementing the TRC or having more of a national dialogue about reconciling the people of Liberia? Because we see a sitting vice, or soon to be sitting vice president, and his political godfather spilling out some rhetoric of quote-unquote unforgiveness of what happened in the past. We see a soon to be sitting senator who is also a warlord, spilling out some apprehension about the new government coming into power, some mistrust between those two groups. What would be Boyka's, what can Boyka do to temper down those rhetoric and also implement true reconciliation in the country? That would be my question to you, Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. And I would just add a third piece to what the caller just said. If Liberian presidents that are coming into Liberia think they can sweep the emotional impact of the civil war under the rug, you're deceiving yourself. That is very disrespectful to those of the entire Liberia. I am not saying retribution should be the order of the day. Don't get me wrong. It's a very fragile country. But this sort of atrocities don't just happen. And you sit there, you say you got a senator for life who literally shot people to death. What have you put in place for people who suffer these atrocities, people who mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters? If Rwanda can do it, I don't know why we can't do it, Liberians. And this is my observation of Liberians. I'm a Liberian. My mother was Bob, my dad, Pele Bassa, Larsah, James, were from the same place. I know you're from Ginkoma or where, but I'll tell you this. The fact that we are sitting in Rwanda, where Hutu and Tutsi massacre one another, of course, with the assistance of whosoever, today they have peace in Rwanda. What are we running away from? We're talking about reparation for slavery, but we can't talk about the atrocities that went on in that country. We expect people to just keep shut and keep quiet. I mean, I think about what many Liberians have gone through. Sometimes I cry. And if I was in that country, I'd be dead long time ago. And that is why the 23 years I've spent in this country, I have no problem sending money back home. Because I just cherish people for living in this country. What should Joseph Boakai do? He should do something. If the TRC is too much for them to do, they should do something. I don't know what his relationship with Prince Johnson is, but that does not escape the fact that people were killed and the atrocity was enormous. Don't just sweep it under the rug. Please. Some form of reparation, some form of peace needs to come. And it's very, very, very important. Don't think people are just quiet and sleeping. People go to bed weeping for people they've lost, properties they lost. You got thousands of Liberians in the Goma Budibura refugee camp who may never return to Liberia. I was there. I interviewed 20 of them for my PhD dissertation. And they got genuine reasons for why they cannot return to Liberia under the United Nations 1951 Convention. Why are they still there? What is the Liberian government going to do? Force them back to Liberia? You don't respect their human rights. Or the UN Convention on the Rights of Refugees with respect to returning to their countries. So what are we doing? Liberians are treated as second-class citizens in Ghana.
Yeah, so
let me bring in two more colors here. The first color here, color with 771 area code, your name and where you calling from. Please turn off what you are watching us from and just make a point. Your name and where you calling from.
My name is James Tamba. I'm watching you from Charlottetown, Chicago, Illinois. I am actually a resident of Atlanta, but I'm visiting with my children for the Christmas in Chicago.
Thank you, James. Go ahead.
I'm calling you. Yeah. My question is, how can there be a possible coexistence when the legal system is not in part with other countries? In other words, we have a very, very terrible legal system. And because of this, because of the backwardness or the corruption in the legal system, we create an atmosphere where investment becomes impossible. investors will not come in the country. Again, we go back to the economy. If the economy is not doing well, hard feelings will be there. Coexistence becomes a dead end. How can we improve our judiciary so that we can create the atmosphere for investment to flow into the country? I think that would be a key. Could you comment on that? And while you are doing so, you should also consider advising, if you have the opportunity, the incoming government to take inventory of what we have in terms of our natural resources. Once we know what we have, then and only then we'll be able to engage in equitable distribution of our wealth, and people will be satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you, James. That's it. Let me go to. We have 3 more callers here. Let me go to the next one. That's a wireless caller with 610 area code. Your name and where you calling from?
Peace to you. Focus on Liberia. Dr. Potter here from Monongahela, Western Pennsylvania.
Dr.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. You said Dr. Pale?
Yes. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Welcome to Focus on Liberia. It should be your first time. Thanks for calling.
I think it is. I just wanted to interject. It's more of a comment.
Okay.
And not a question. I listened to Professor Reeves, and I think it's a good show. A lot has to be done in Liberia in the area of the social sciences, especially with the challenges that people are encountering in the country. Education, for the first and foremost, has to be emphasized, re-emphasized, and in terms of the allotment that has been made in the past, and maybe with the coming new government, a considerable amount of the nation's budget must go towards education, healthcare, and probably tourism. And Liberia has an incredible potential to grow in the area of these particular 3 areas I've just highlighted. But I think we need a government that has the interest of the people, that is willing to be able to use the resources of the nation at the disposal of the ordinary people. Liberia needs economic empowerment. And if we are going to do that, a considerable level of engagement from the grassroots level must be done. It's good to focus on Liberia, and some of the programs that you guys are involved with is education, awareness, bringing in those who are experts in their field, as Dr. Reeves is indicating tonight, to be able to engage our people, to create equity. If there's going to be a social inclusion, when there is equity and inclusion, it means every facet of society have to be mobilized. And to do that, you must have strategic leaders, people who are experts in their field, who can be able to come and contribute, bring something to the table, to be able to bring about the education that is needed. Just in the area of equity, as we are speaking, I think governments in the past failed our people when a considerable number of the population were not given the opportunity to be able to open up the country. I think practically when I was growing up in the late 70s, I'd see the only person, maybe the only leader who was taking a step in such direction. As young and as very little I was, I would attribute that leader to be William Richard Talbot. Talbot came before his time, and he did not live long. And since then, we have had a very challenging situation from one crisis to another. The only way Liberia is going to move forward, I think we have the potential to make a difference with the incredible level of educated Liberians all over the world. They may not have the opportunity to live in Liberia at this very moment. But with globalization and with the level of engagement from the diaspora, if any government, whether it's this government that is coming into being, if it can be able to open the doors and the corridors of power to diaspora Liberians who have the expertise, and I think there's a lot that can be done to bring about the building of a new Liberia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Bala.
Thank you.
All right. Let me.
Merry Christmas.
Happy returns. Let me bring in Mr. Stephen Adams. Steve, you are live.
Yes, good evening, panelists. Good evening, Mr. John. Merry Christmas to you all. I have a different take on this so-called reconciliation and people advocating for Liberia. First of all, I would like to say that we have, over the last 30 plus years, continued to say we are coming from a broken society, coming from a war. The war was 40 years ago, 30 years ago. It doesn't hold water to continue going back to that aspect of our lives. The second thing is, the thing I really want to discuss tonight was the incoming government and what it could do to foster change in the lives of our people. I've always advocated said that you do not go to government to get rich. You go to government to be able to contribute and enable the growth of our private sector. The problem is everybody around the President Biden right now that I've been observing are in it to be some functionary in the government. The government or the administration should focus on the business of merit, the business of bringing people in that are capable of implementing the various policy edit of the government. I don't know what the policy edit of this government is, but I'm hoping that is to foster growth, to foster economic development, and to foster empowerment of the population. Unfortunately, though, a lot of our people want to go in and work for the government and make big money. Money they were not making in the diaspora. A lot of these guys are making less than $3,000-4,000 a month in the diaspora, and they go to Liberia and expect to make $20,000 and ride big cars. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that the government should effect policy edict that insists that if you're going to work for the government, if you take a job in the government, you should take a job to contribute and be committed to contributing to the welfare of the people and not to enrich yourself. If you want to enrich yourself, go to the private sector.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for us, a lot of our people, they make a lot of noise on social media and stuff, but they don't have any acumen to go in, pull up themselves by the bootstrap, and try to create a situation where you employ one or two other people. And then those one or two other people, after a while, employ one or two other people. That is how society grows. Society does not grow by depending on the government. The government should only be an enabling environment that will help to facilitate the growth of the private sector. And this is something that we could discuss for hours and hours, but I just want to put these 2 cents in because I just got in and saw your program and thought the program was extremely enlightening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. Let me take the last caller here, and that's Teddy Tel Lanyon Yankun from Fargo, North Dakota.
Thanks very much for the job. Greetings to everybody, more especially to the dynamic lady in the studio.
Thank you.
Greetings to her. And we are very much impressed about the liberation and what she said about peace and coming together. Well, and one thing you said that really come to me that make the encouragement to come on show is that there are people who have done wrong to the indigenous people, but they refuse to admit The indigenous people have been people who always want peace, they always want to embrace their brothers, they want their brothers to understand them, at least find a way to live in peace. But over the years, the decades, they have not been treated well. So one of the factors that our people should recognize. But however, I'm Teddy Lion Yakun. I'm a stalwart in the CDC party, a global chairman that controls 3 major political auxiliaries within the CDC. I'm based in Fargo, North Dakota. But my take on this topic will be a little bit more political, and I'll take responsibility to everything I would say. Not the CDC, not the FOL.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Reconciliation, I want to believe that, for first and foremost, the Liberian people, the happiness of the Liberian people have been thwarted since the result of the election. But I think in history, the Liberian people should applaud President George Manawea as a peaceful man who always been forgiving, giving his rights out just because of the sake of Liberia, Mama Liberia, for peace. It's not the first time over the many elections have been held in Liberia when you have participated. Okay.
Thank
the
you.
happiness of Liberian people have been further since the end of the election.
Yeah.
Because we are truly have been the one that have been making the Liberian people happy with peace. I believe that the Liberian people should have continued with their dynamics, and because we are already on the right trajectory to unite the country. But now I can tell you that the country is in the strange political terrain. We now having a president-elect, Bwaka, with all the circumstances, with all the things, Liberian people have said, with all the lapses. But this man have been re-elected. He have been elected, and President we have considered. Probably many of we citizens are still grieving, but trust me.
I can tell you, Teddy, you are still grieving, but thank you for your contribution.
Wow.
Thank you.
Well, Dennis.
Professor Reeves, it's all yours.
If I can come in here, do you see, James and Dennis, why I decided that to come on your platform to talk about this? This is one person in the United States talking about grieving. There are thousands who are still grieving about George. We are not winning these elections. Now, if you believe in democracy, to the last caller, and you believe in the freedom of people to exercise their voting right, you will kindly accept President Weah's lost and John Barker to develop a better Liberia. This is where the coexistence comes in. Second to the last caller, I said the Civil War was 30 or 40 years ago and we should forget about it. I think that is, I can't come up with a word to that, but for me sitting here, Mr. Caller, as a mental health specialist, a professor in social work, and we talk about social issues, the health and well-being of people, that is one of the most painful statements he could make to someone who lost their mother, father, brother, sister, or experienced massive atrocities during this war. Up to today's date, the Canadian government and the American government is still apologizing to indigenous people in North America for colonization. I heard Louis Farrakhan one time talked about reparation for slavery. We are still talking about race and race relations in North America. Is it that we Africans or Liberians do not understand the importance of human dynamics and human lives and human rights? Is it that we don't understand it or we don't care about it? that we can say a civil war happened 30 years ago and forget about it. That's one of the worst statements to make to someone grieving. Liberians did not ask for that war. The political leaders that asked for that war or brought that war onto Liberians need to work together to bring some sense of peace to the hearts of Liberians. If you make that kind of statement, what you're saying to The Hague is you have no business having Charles Taylor to where he is. So we need to be mindful of doing things and thinking it's okay to just let it go. You know, I'm not saying there should be retribution here, but we can peacefully coexist if we realize our wrongs and try to make peace and soothing the hearts of people who are still weeping.
Thank you, Nancy. Let me bring in what James Tamba said about how can peaceful coexistence be possible with a terrible legal system. He said, how can we improve our judicial system? He said corruption is in the legal system. So if you wrong somebody and that person is not seeking justice, how can we talk about peaceful coexistence? He also said you should consider advising the government the incoming government to take an inventory of our natural resources, because if these resources are concentrated in the hands of the few, there will always be upheaval, thereby preventing peaceful coexistence. I want you to speak to that quickly, as we are almost out of time.
But then it's not that the laws are not there. We got 3 branches of government. The laws are there, but people have just decided to not follow the rules. And because there is no standard of practice. If someone did something wrong, Donald Trump was the president of America, and you see what's happening with him. Right? No one is above the law. So if we sit in Liberia and we have the law in place and people go against the law and we just sit because someone would chip little money under the table and they will go, then of course the very same people that created the law abuse the law. So something has to be put in place to make sure those 3 branches of government are highly functional. So I don't know where you can go and borrow it from. I don't know, but follow the rules of the law and implement the law, period.
Thank you. Anything else you want to respond to? Dr. Pala said, open the doors to diaspora Liberians with the expertise. That's one way of moving the country forward.
I can tell you, Dennis, I'm not praising myself, but I got a way of teaching social work that is one of the best in Canada. I was walking in the mall the last time with my husband, and one of my students for the last 10 years came up to my husband and he said, "This woman made me who I am." I hope someone else was saying it, but Liberians and those in power need to invest in the knowledge and skills of other Liberians. And I can say this to anyone. Come January 2nd, I'm a professor at a college here in Canada. I can leave this job and come to Liberia, but I can contribute to the educational system in Liberia. Developing curriculum, coming up with good outcome-based education, innovation, creativity, experiential learning, you name it. I've done workshops in Liberia. People enjoy it, but it's almost like passing through to get into doing something. It's almost like you're sacrificing yourself, and many of us don't have the time for that. You don't have the time for that. Why should I struggle so much to contribute to a place that I call my country? I'm not asking for someone's job. I don't need someone's job. I got a good job here that pays me very well. and all of the other things behind it. You take care, they will person you and whatnot. It scares the life out of people. So the Liberians need those in authority. If I was the Minister of Education, I'd be getting in touch with educators in the diaspora and say, let's sit together and see how we can create better kindergarten, junior high, senior high, tertiary educational curriculum for Liberia. Work with local Liberians teachers and do that. If even you have a conference on that, that's great. That's a contribution to Liberia. But they have stiffened the path so much that it's just very discouraging. And as a result, you got students coming out of the university with little or nothing to compete in this 21st century.
Thank you. Few comments here. Joseph Classy, the incoming president must make sure all of the ministers drive the cheapest used cars. If any minister want to drive expensive car, they must buy it from their pockets. Mietra Stelling says, I think that the professor should address the mental health of our people and what can be done to or should be implemented to get the masses of our people on a stable state first and foremost before anything else.
I'm coming.
Mianta also said Liberia's problem is not politics. Liberia's problem is illegality, which breeds the magnitude of ignorance the nation is faced with today. And that's a quote. Until we start pushing things under the rug, turning a blind eye and a deaf ear to the real issues that the nation is faced with,
yes,
compartmentalize each piece and work on it individually, we will be going nowhere.
Absolutely.
Ever said the war ended in 2003, that was mere 20 years ago, considering the magnitude of the atrocities that took place in our nation. And Sam Waller detailed that by saying the war officially ended in August 2003. There has not been a focus on rehabilitating the everyday people in the past 20 years. It's time for this to happen.
Amen.
President-elect Boaka, if you are listening, please. All right, those are a few of the comments. Let me bring in James before we ask Professor Reeve for closing. River says, Professor, during the 1980s, when growing up, I didn't care the tribe of my classmates. I didn't know or care what tribe my neighbors were. It is different now. James, down. So.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. So, Nancy actually spoke to three key elements there. She talked about the importance of having different views, in fact, disagreements, but how it is even more important to be able to share those views, and then most importantly to express those views. And it's been a great show. Now, my conclusion will be about the role of civil society, like she rightfully stated. Everybody must contribute. We have to be able to speak out. Nancy said we should express our views. Civil society must speak out to the ills of society. We have to be active participants. That will be a guide rail to helping in shaping the destiny of the nation, of the society, so that at a point we can appreciate that things have changed and that there is a better equitable distribution of the economic wealth of the country. It couldn't be more emphasized. So Nancy, I want to say thank you ever so much. Tonight, you shed great light on the issues facing the country with respect to peaceful coexistence. We all have to be active participants. And I want to say thanks, Dennis, for the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, James. One of the callers or writers talk about mental health. Dennis and myself have been talking about mental health issues. Dennis even ran a series of shows on mental health in Liberia, and my doctorate has a huge portion of trauma and the trauma of the war and the mental health implications of that. So maybe after some times, I will definitely come back on this show to talk about mental health of Liberians. And to the caller who said, forget about this war, they will get to know the impact of mental health, the impact of the war on the mental health of Liberians.
He's saying you misunderstood him. He said the professor misunderstood me. We need to implement the TRC and work on developing our economy.
But what is the TRC about?
And Abby said Liberians place emphasis on mental health as they should. Why do they pay so little attention to medical health? Abby is our FOLF contributor. So,
but if you look at the definition of mental health, it encompasses the physical health or the physiological health. You can have a bad mental health and have a better medical condition. It's all based on the United Nations definition of mental health.
And the opposite is also true, right? You can have bad health and still have
and your mental health, right? So they both, coexist, as we may say. But absolutely. So Dennis, what you're hearing there's a need to talk about mental health, the mental health of Liberians. And as I said, poverty is traumatic, can be traumatic. Civil war is traumatic. And has the civil war of Liberia left a huge mental health crisis in that country? Absolutely, yes.
Thank you so much, Professor Nancy Reeves-Davis. I don't want to forget the Davis part of it before I fall in trouble. And thank you, Jimmy. At this time, Professor Reeves, let's get to your closing comments, and we can draw down the curtains.
Well, I would say thank you so much, Dennis, for allowing me to discuss it, and all of those who contributed. I think Liberians, we need to start really thinking. When I thought about this, I thought more of all of the social, economic, political situations we got going. How do we create sustainable development? With all of these issues, how do we create it if we cannot coexist? And as we've heard tonight, some of your callers have stated the government has a role to play in this. And you've asked a lot of questions with how the government can be involved in this. Absolutely. So does President Bouaka have a load to carry? Yes, he has a load to carry, but that's what he set up for. He and his government. It is my wish or desire that the lives of Liberians would be better than the last 6 years, or even before the last 6 years. We should be moving into a 21st century where Liberians don't have to be running off to the United States and other countries to better their lives. You can live in Liberia and better your life. I'll tell you the truth. When I'm in Liberia, I'm less stressed than when I'm in Canada. Honestly speaking, I'm very, very less stressed than when I'm here. So do we just want to live out of Liberia and say, you can get a better job here? You can get a good job in Liberia with less income and be happy. And your mental and physical health will be good. But it's left with our governments to look after the well-being of Liberians and that country, Liberia. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. James, you're closing, sir.
Yeah, Dennis, like I was saying, it's been a great show. So I'm actually just stressing one of the key points stressed by Professor Nancy Reeves-Davis regarding expressing our views, not only the area she spoke about us, about the need to have a view or even disagreement, but also the need to share them. We need to share our views, our disagreements, and we also need to express them. As a society, it's important for peaceful coexistence, for citizens, the people, to express their views, for civil society to speak out and not be quiet and not be bought, for society members to not be spectators but active participants in the governance of the country. That leads to good governance it helps the government, it helps the governing authority, to keep a guardrail on the process of development. The sum total of that is the government in interaction with the people, leading to better outcome. And so I think it's been a good show tonight, and hopefully a lot can be gained from the discourse.
Thank you so much. Our series Moving Liberia Forward continues. We'll be looking at agriculture, healthcare, and other things. So please stay tuned to Focus on Liberia. On behalf of all of us here at Focus on Liberia, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Even if you don't celebrate Christmas, we say enjoy the festive season, live happy, and always watch Focus on Liberia, because this is part of peaceful coexistence.
Merry Christmas.
On that note, we play our song that says we are all Liberians. Have a good night and God bless you.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home. Liberian people. Our